Good afternoon, folks. We're here to talk to you about how you can improve conversion for your use cases, for your merchants, you as developers who integrate with PayPal or PayPal checkout. The use case we'll be focusing on today is the physical goods use case. We also call it one-time checkout interchangeably. It can also apply to digital goods, one-time purchases. This is really the majority use case. And this can apply to almost all of the transactions that you as merchants are facilitating on your surfaces. There are other sessions if you have recurring transactions, and another session as well that focuses solely on online to offline high frequency transactions as well. There's a schedule posted right outside this room, and I'll be available afterwards to talk to you about all of those other sessions. But I just wanted to provide a framing because PayPal checkout, PayPal, there's a lot that's involved within there. I just want to make sure we're talking about Pay with PayPal in the physical goods vertical specifically, but this applies to other verticals as well, as you'll see. Before we get too far ahead, just as a way of introduction, I'm Fahad Khan. I'm a product manager on PayPal checkout. I'll be joined here with my colleagues, Krish, who's a product manager on our SDK team, and Ravi, who's a software engineer on our SDK team. Before we get too far into how you can improve your conversion using the enhancements that we've been working on over the past few months, I think I just want to ground ourselves into what is the issue and the problem that we're trying to solve with all of these enhancements that we're about to talk to you about. So if you look in front of you here, on the left-hand side, we have a typical merchant experience. And I would hypothesize that most of the merchants in this room, their PayPal experience looks something like this, where the user starts off on your website, looks for a product, adds that product to the cart, which is the first screen that you see on the left-hand side, then ultimately proceeds to merchant checkout, types in their login information or types in their address manually, selects their shipping address, proceeds to the payment method selection page where they finally select PayPal. After the user selects PayPal, they end up going to the PayPal experience where they get a very friction-filled login experience. This is the area where we see a lot of drop-offs, and this is the area that we focused on with the enhancements that I'll be talking to you about. After the user identifies and authenticates themselves, the user then is taken to the PayPal pay sheet where all they can really do is select their payment method. And this, what I'm showing you here, is our old pay sheet. As you'll see in a minute, we've actually been hard at work at reimagining what this experience, even within our pay sheet, could look like. After the user approves the transaction on the PayPal pay sheet, 9 times out of 10 in this vertical, what we see is the user goes back to the merchant website to then review the details of this order, to select the correct shipping method, and then finally approve the purchase, place the order. This is obviously completely friction-filled, high-friction login, no order information on the PayPal checkout page, and many extraneous steps. So if you count it with me here, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clicks, and that's only after the user has decided what they want to buy. And so we've been hard at work at solving every part of this problem, and that's what I'll be talking to you about today. So now, I have a bit of a comparison video here. On the right-hand side will be the new experience that we want to, we'll show you how to integrate. And on the left-hand side is our old experience that is live on most merchants today. I really want you to pay attention to the one on the right because it's so fast, if you blink, you'll miss it. So I'm gonna get the videos going, but pay attention to the one on the right because, trust me, that'll be done. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the one on the left. Let's go. The user clicks PayPal, app switches into the app, does biometric login, is taken to the pay sheet, that is our brand new pay sheet that loads instantaneously, approves the payment, and the transaction is done. Meanwhile, the user on the left on our old application has not even completed logging in. And now finally, the user is approving the payment. I know that went by really fast, so on the next page, I'll have a bit of a deep dive into every step of what you saw here. The most important thing to drive incremental click-through on your surface, on the merchant surface, is the PayPal button presentment upstream. This really short circuits all manual data entry. I'll do a bit of a deep dive into each of these steps of the checkout funnel, but let me just actually ground us in the whole flow. The user selects PayPal on the merchant cart page. The user goes to the PayPal app to approve the transaction. The user is taken back to the merchant website for the order success page. And then afterwards, the user can track their package once the package is shipped. That's the last screen on the right. If you see this flow end to end, we've reduced what was 7 clicks down to 2 clicks here. And so let's do a bit of a deep dive into how we did that. On the left-hand side, the button is presented upstream with dynamic messaging. There's that piece of text that highlights a pay later or pay in 4 offer. This text has been proven to drive incremental average order values and incremental click-through rate on the cart. We actually recommend that you put that text on the product description page itself. Anytime you talk to your users about the dollar amount of their purchase, you should include some messaging about how much it could be if they were to split it into installments. Then you have the PayPal button painted very easily by our SDK. When the user clicks that button, if this user is in a mobile web or a native app context, they can app switch, and they have the app installed. They can app switch into our PayPal app, where we can leverage their login token that is stored inside the PayPal app to provide a very low friction login experience compared to what exists today in mobile web and in native apps. As you can see here, the app switch is really quick, and it takes them directly into our brand new pay sheet. Majority of our active users actually have our app installed. And so this is going to become the default way to pay for your PayPal transactions everywhere. That brings me to the screen in the middle, which is our PayPal pay sheet, the brand new redesigned PayPal pay sheet. I'm not sure, this may be the first time that a few of the people in the room are seeing it. We have ramped it across many of our surfaces. Maybe some of you have interacted with it already. It has been completely redesigned from the ground up, but not just from a UX perspective, also from a back-end infrastructure perspective. Our old application had like a P95 or P99 latencies of around 4 seconds. This application has less than 2. So the time to interactive from when a user authenticates and lands on this pay sheet and is ready to check out is less than 2 seconds. And if you look at this pay sheet, it starts out with payment choice. The user selects how they want to pay, how they want to split their payment, goes directly into their funding method. Next, the user can select their shipping address and shipping method. That is enabled by brand new functionality that we've launched over the past couple of months called server-side shipping callbacks that Christian Ravi will be showing you how to implement. That functionality really establishes bi-directional communication between PayPal and the merchant while the user is on the PayPal pay sheet. As the user updates their address, as the user selects new shipping methods, you as the merchant are able to get the information of what the user is selecting, so your order management system and the PayPal pay sheet can be in sync and show the updated dollar amounts to the user. Next, coming down, one more module, we have the contact module. The user can now specify which email address they want you as the merchant to contact them on. Historically, we have only used the PayPal account email, but now we're giving flexibility to our users to be able to select an alternate email address because we do find that a lot of our PayPal users have multiple email addresses on file. Finally, there's the order module right at the very bottom, which when you expand, you can see line item details inside there. When the user clicks pay, we app switch back to the browser or to the native app that the user came from. And since you, as the merchant, have captured all the information on the PayPal pay sheet, and we've kept you in sync as the user was making their selections on the PayPal pay sheet, you do not need to collect any extra information on this last page. And you can just consider the transaction successful and approved and show the order confirmation page. Finally, when you do end up shipping the order, you can use our APIs to update the tracking number into that PayPal order, which will help extremely with dispute resolution and actually a reduction in disputes raised by the user as well, based on studies we've done with merchants that have gone live with package tracking. That's the end-to-end. Just to summarize, I think I'll say, what's important is presenting the PayPal button upstream with dynamic messaging, app switch to leverage reduced login friction, brand new pay sheet that includes line item details, shipping methods and shipping module, and the contact module. I'll hand it over to Krish, who will walk you through how you can actually implement this in the code. Thank you.
Thanks, Fahad. So now I'll be walking you all through the client side as well as server side integration code changes. And we're going to go through all these 5 functionalities that Fahad just covered. So just to quickly summarize, we've got the dynamic messaging, which you got to enable upstream, probably on the product details page to incentivize the user to actually click the PayPal button. You've got the app switch, which reduces your clicks from 7 down to 4 by completely bypassing your 2FA requirements. You've got the server-side shipping callback, which does the low latency shipping and tax calculations directly from the PayPal server to the merchant server. You've got the contact module, which allows the end user to select an email other than the one that PayPal has on file for notifications. And then we've got post-purchase tracking, where you can patch your tracking information back into the order itself. So let's start out with dynamic messaging. You all might know this as the pay later messaging, which uses your messaging component. So there are 2 ways of actually implementing this. The code that we have up here is with the message config being within our PayPal buttons component. And this allows you to enable the messaging right within the button stack itself. So in this example here, we've got pay in full of 4 interest-free payments of $30 each. And this is powered by our dynamic messaging logic, which based on the amount and based on the checkout flow scenario, it can change and vary best to incentivize the actual PayPal button click. Now, to implement the standalone messaging without the buttons, you can use the PayPal.messages directly, and the config is going to be the same, but you got to use the message component rather than the buttons itself. Next up, we've got the app switch. Now, as I said earlier, from the 7 clicks down to 2 clicks, we can probably say that 4 of the clicks are eliminated by enabling app switch. So this is a huge value add for our end customers, and we're really excited about this new feature. It's currently in alpha, but it should be live within a few months, and really excited for everyone to get their hands on this one. So the first code change that you got to do to enable this would be within your create order call on the merchant server. You've got the experience context object. So let me walk you through the individual deltas and changes that you got to make. Let's start out with the return and cancel URLs. So this might be something which not a lot of merchants have set up earlier, because in the normal pay with PayPal flow, you got the pop-up, and then the pop-up closes, and you go back to the merchant page. But with the app switch, since we're changing context from the merchant context to the PayPal app, we need to know where to get the end user back. So we've got the return and cancel URL here, and we sort of, as a best practice, we sort of recommend putting the current URL that the user came back from, just for a more seamless flow. Then we've got the app switch preference, where the merchant can specify launch PayPal as true. And this allows the merchant a lot of flexibility, where you can actually turn that flag on or off for certain checkout scenarios. And it's not on by default. It provides a lot more flexibility for the merchant itself. So that covers the server-side code. Now coming to the client-side code here. This code snippet that you're seeing represents our React SDK code. But just calling out that app switch would work pretty agnostic of whatever client-side integration you're using. So it should work just as you see here for the web SDK itself. So in the top section here, we're using use PayPal buttons. So we've implemented the use of hooks to basically make these states dynamic. So you've got your buttons, is loaded, has returned, and resume. And this allows the SDK to actually dynamically create the components that's returned and allows us to orchestrate the app switch from start to finish without having the merchant actually worry about any of this conditional rendering logic. Next up, we've got the server-side shipping callback, which I would say is the second most important function that we have here. Now, just to clarify what exactly is the latency save, if you all have implemented client-side shipping callback, the way it works is from the checkout window, that signal goes to the SDK on the client side. We intimate that knowledge to the merchant, who then hits their merchant server. But with the server-side shipping callback, we've completely eliminated that hop to the client side. You've got the callback directly going from the PayPal server to the merchant server. Now, what does that mean? That basically means that the shipping and tax calculations are much quicker. So the loading state that the end user sees is at least 90% quicker there. And that sort of reduces their user frustration and reduces drop-offs overall on the checkout session. So just to go over the actual code changes, again, we're dealing with the experience context in the create order merchant side server call. Within experience context, we've got the config there. So just tackling that first line item there, we've got callback events. So this is where the merchant basically lets PayPal know what callback events they want to subscribe to. So we've got shipping address callback as well as shipping options callback. We recommend not putting in shipping options callback if you're only displaying one shipping options. That will reduce the latency or any callbacks, redundant callbacks to the merchant server. And then we've got the callback URL here. Now, this is the endpoint on the merchant server, which PayPal server will be sending the callbacks to. Now, let's say the end user enters the checkout session window, and we fetch their address on file, and that would trigger the shipping address callback. So that address data is sent to the merchant server at the callback URL, which is defined here. And the merchant is expected to respond to that callback with the updated purchase units as well as shipping option values. And then this information is used by the checkout session to update all of the new addresses, shipping options, and the user can get on with their transaction. PayPal used to use the email and phone information that was on file. But we realized there are a lot of scenarios where the end user might not want to use the email address they have on file for notifications, but want to customize that. So that's why we came up with the contact module, where it either allows the merchant to use the ones they have on file or lets the user update it on the checkout session itself. So to actually enable this, again, you're dealing with the experience context. You've got the contact preference. Right here, we're using the update contact info enum. We've got a couple other enums there. And then if the merchant actually took this information beforehand, they also have the option of setting it within their purchase units within the shipping object itself. Now, we don't have a slide here just for the purchase unit line items, but just want to call out that it's also very good practice to put in your cart item line details within your purchase unit itself. That will allow the orders modal to actually display all the order details and the product item details. And that builds a lot of confidence with the end user and actually convinces them to actually go ahead with the checkout. And last but not least, we've got the post-purchase tracking. Here, once the transaction goes through and the merchant receives the tracking information from, let's say, FedEx with the tracking number and the URL, they can actually patch that information back to the order itself. One cool thing to note is we've got the notify payer flag, which, if set to true, will intimate to PayPal that they should notify the end user that there's new tracking information for them to actually go out and checkout. And that sort of provides a lot of confidence and customer satisfaction for the user. And it's a more end-to-end experience for them. So that was a lot of code changes, but we try to be very concise, very intuitive with the integration patterns itself. And I'm going to hand over to Ravi Shekhar, who's actually going to show the end-to-end demo and answer any of your more in-depth questions.
Okay, so for the purpose of this discussion, what we are going to do is that we will refer to a sequence diagram. This will cover how a merchant typically would integrate with PayPal checkout. And in parallel, we'll also look at what experience will be there for the buyer and what code change is required to implement this particular, at any of these particular steps. So let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so first thing first, right? So if you see the left-hand side, a buyer visits the merchant page, assuming this sequence diagram assumes that the user has visited other pages of merchant first, their catalog page and other stuff, and they have added some item to their cart, right? And now they have visited the merchant checkout page, right? So they are on merchant checkout page. At this moment, what merchant needs to do is that they will be rendering their checkout page for the user, and in parallel, they need to load the PayPal JS SDK or using the React SDK, and they can render the PayPal buttons. So at the step number 4, the PayPal buttons would be shown on the merchant's web page. So let me pause sequence diagram. Let's go back to the demo, and then I will go back to the code to see what it looks like to get to step number 4. So once we have completed the step number 4, we will be the user will be in this particular state where they assume that this is the merchant's checkout page, right? And this merchant is selling certain items, right? They are selling potted plant and seedling and a couple of stuffs. A pretty high value item, as you can see, $100, $200. Okay, the reason why I kept a little higher value so that I can show some meaningful credit messaging, right? Which you see in pay in full or interest-free payments of $100, right? Because the total purchase value is $400 right here. So at this moment, when a user visits the merchant's checkout page, right, they can see if they want to split the payments or they want to pay in full, right? Okay, so I have paused the video here. So let's take a look into the code what a merchant would need to implement to reach till this point, right? For them to render the PayPal buttons for the user. So let me go to the code. So by the way, these code samples would be shared at the end of this presentation. So you can definitely clone it out. So this code has been structured in 2 parts. One part is the server-side application, which is a Fastify-based application, and this application has been forked from one of our examples which we have. And we also have a client-side application that has been implemented in React. So this is again a very basic implementation of React router-based React application. But your real application can be in any language, any framework. But these examples are only to illustrate a very basic implementation of these features. We are at the step number 4 when a merchant is rendering the PayPal buttons for the user. Let's see the code what a merchant would need to do at that point. So this example application has been configured with very basic setup. That is on the home, right? I am inserting PayPal buttons here, right? And since I'm using React SDK here, we can very well use a regular web SDK as well. But in this example, I'm using the React SDK. So over here, what a merchant needs to do is that they need to define 2 lifecycle hooks. I will talk about it in just a moment, right? That is the create order and on approve callback hooks, right? So these are the 2 lifecycle hooks in the order lifecycle. I will also talk about what an order means. And they need to pass these 2 callback hooks to the PayPal checkout buttons, which PayPal buttons would use in the lifecycle of the checkout. Okay, so once a merchant does this, that is they put the PayPal script provider, right? And then inside of it, they also render the PayPal buttons, right? Oops, I'm in the wrong place. Let me go back to the right place. Okay, So, and then inside of the script provider, they put the PayPal buttons component, right? The PayPal buttons would show up. Now, over here, as I was mentioning earlier, right, a merchant needs to pass two of the most important lifecycle hooks, that is create order and on approve. And so basically on a very, very high level, I will go a little bit deep into that as well. Create order is something which is fired when the user first time clicks the PayPal button, and on approve is fired when the user has completed all the steps on PayPal checkout. Okay, apart from that, as Krish was mentioning earlier, you as a merchant can also pass the total amount of the entire checkout cart. This allows the buttons component to render an appropriate credit messaging. For instance, let me go back again to that demo. As you can see, right, in this particular screen, right, this PayPal buttons can present, right, if a credit messaging offer is applicable for this entire purchase, right? So basically, in this purchase, since the entire checkout is of $400, it can be very well splitted into 4 interest-free payments of $100. So this small step allows the buyer to kind of make a more informed decision if they can leverage a credit offer, or if they are required to pay the entire amount in full. So this option would be available for the user. Back to sequence diagram. So we were at the step number 4, right, where the PayPal buttons has been rendered. And at this point, the buyer decides to click on PayPal checkout button, which would trigger a callback hook, that is a lifecycle hook, create order. Now, this lifecycle hook is something which you as a merchant needs to implement. This is the code which I was showing you earlier, right? That method has to be passed on to the JS SDK. And this create order callback hook should be sent back to your web server, that is the merchant server in this context, which in turn should call PayPal Orders API, and this will return back an order ID. Now, what does this mean, right? What do we mean when we say that call the Orders API, get an order ID? So the order ID is a representation of your checkout session. So for instance, right, you may be selling, let's say 10 items, right? So each of those line items goes into the create order call. Similarly, your tax breakup, your shipping amounts, right? All those information can go into your create order call, right? So now the entire cart can be represented using this order ID, and you don't really need to pass on entire payload over and over again. Okay, so at this stage, the moment order ID gets generated, it is returned back to the PayPal Web SDK, and the Web SDK launches the checkout flow using this order ID. So let's take a break from sequence diagram at a step 12, that is the checkout page being launched using the order ID, and let's go to the demo once again. Okay, we were here, that is the buttons has been rendered. Now a user decides to click the PayPal button, right? And the PayPal checkout page shows up for the user, right? Now, the PayPal checkout page would show all the applicable options this user has for this purchase. For instance, if you see the top section, right, the user can decide to either pay the entire $400 in full right now, right? Or they may decide to split the purchases in pay in 4 installments or even pay monthly installments. So this option is available to the user. Now again, this is applicable. These options will only show up if the user is eligible for any of these options. Okay. Now on this page, a user can select if they want to use the same instrument or a different instrument from their wallet. Okay. Now before we move forward, let's talk about this important section, the delivery section, and how it helps, right? So typically, right, there are multiple ways in which a merchant can collect the buyer's shipping address and ship the product to the buyer, right? But what that means is that the merchant needs to handle multiple steps in the entire checkout process, right? Where they first collect the buyer's address, determine the shipping cost and everything, and then try to present the entire amount to the user, right? But this page kind of allows the merchant to present the entire checkout amount as well as any applicable shipping options at the same time without like trying to introduce additional friction points or additional web pages in the entire flow. So how does this get implemented, right? So on the sequence diagram, what has happened so far is that the PayPal checkout has been launched, user logged in, and the user selected a shipping address. Now, the step number 14, right, where I say that user selected the shipping address, for the first time, this happens by default because whatever shipping option this buyer had on profile as default, that got selected as the default shipping option. This, on selection of that default shipping address as the shipping address, PayPal checkout will make a shipping address callback back to the merchant's own configured server, right? This URL is provided by merchant server. I will talk about that, how merchant can implement it in just a moment. And this particular endpoint needs to return a list of supported shipping options, which is supported for this particular transaction. So based on the response, all the shipping options gets rendered right here. Now let's take a look in the code implementation, what a merchant would be typically doing on their server side. So let's take a look in this small controller, right? Again, this, as I said earlier, this is just a Fastify-based application, right? Which is making a call to PayPal Orders API. So what does a merchant needs to pass to the Orders API is, first is the purchase units. Purchase units represent a couple of things, including the total amount of the purchase which user was making, right? And then there are a couple of optional things as well. For instance, like these options, if they are 0 by default, they can definitely be, merchant can definitely eliminate those or not pass it at all. I'll talk about this part in after a couple of moments. Yep, the items, it represents all the line items which the user is purchasing from this merchant. And in the payment source section, inside of payment source, we have the experience context. Now, in the experience context, there are a couple of important things. The first one being the user action. So user action pay now basically indicates to PayPal that this merchant is not going to present any other interstitial pages or any more web pages or any friction points after user approves the transaction on PayPal. So this allows like a better conversion because there is no additional drop-off point for the buyer, right? Apart from that, right, this particular line, this particular piece, right, where merchant is providing order update callback configuration. In this configuration, a merchant can opt in to receive two kinds of callbacks. One is shipping address change callback, and the other one is shipping options change callback. So as the name implies, right, what each of these enums indicates is that the moment user changes the shipping address on PayPal checkout page, it should call this merchant's configured web URL. Now, this URL needs to be hosted by merchant, it needs to be HTTPS URL, and it should not be behind any firewall or any kind of auth sessions or anything like that, right? It should be publicly accessible. So PayPal checkout web will call this URL the moment user changes either shipping address, or even if the merchant wants to listen to shipping options callback, they can configure it. Like for instance, as a merchant may have some requirements to do certain tax calculation based on shipping options as well. So they can very well listen to this callback and compute the values accordingly and pass it back from this particular API endpoint. Okay, so let me take a pause here on the create order payload and let me go to the shipping API, right? The shipping callback API, which a merchant needs to implement, right? So on this API, right, the merchant would receive the entire input, right, in the structure as which you can find in this particular DevDoc shipping module. And in this one, right, for the purpose of this demo, I have hard-coded certain shipping options, but you can very well make an call to some shipping provider like FedEx, UPS, or any such provider to retrieve the shipping options for this address which the buyer has entered, right? And you need to return back to PayPal checkout so that PayPal checkout can render. Now, this little section which we see here, I will talk about it in just a moment. Before that, so once you have determined all the shipping options, we need to return it back to the PayPal checkout from this particular shipping API. Okay, now, once we have done that, what would happen is PayPal checkout web will be able to render all the shipping options, and the moment the buyer makes any of selections of any of the shipping options, right, and assuming the merchant also wants to listen to shipping option change, An API call has been made from here to merchant's configured endpoint again, but this time the payload also contains a shipping option. This allows the merchant to do any fine-tuned calculation based on of taxes or any such amount, right, based on the selected shipping option. So over here, merchant can calculate the total values and return back the total amount. Now for this example, I'm using very simple JavaScript number-based calculations. In an ideal world, please don't use JavaScript floating calculations. Use some better libraries like Big Decimal or decimal.js or a better maths library to avoid any kind of weird floating issues with these default calculations. But yeah, but basically at this point, the moment merchant receives the shipping option change callback, merchant can calculate the entire value and return back the result back to PayPal checkout web, and checkout web will render all the options for the buyer. Okay, so at this point, the user has selected a delivery option, that is priority shipping, and let's move forward. So contact module, right? So this is what Krish was mentioning earlier, that a buyer may have a default email address or phone number on profile, but they may wish to select a different option, right, or a different email address for this particular transaction alone. So this particular section allows the buyer to select a different option, or even the merchant to provide an email. Let's say there may be cases where the merchant may have a profile of the buyer. So merchant can pass that information as well to PayPal checkout web, and checkout can and the buyer can select one of these options, right? Like in this case, right, merchant is passing one of the values to PayPal checkout, which was selected by default, right? And user can make a change right here, right, to a different option. Okay, now to pass that, again in the create order callback, that is the first lifecycle hook, the merchant needs to pass contact preference as update contact info, and optionally, this is where we were talking earlier, the shipping, right, the shipping section. Optionally, if the merchant has this data available, they can pass the buyer's shipping address as well as buyer's phone number or country code. Again, it's an optional field. If the merchant has it, they can pass it, or they can elect not to pass this data. Okay, once we have done this, so the user can now select their shipping address, their delivery method, their contact information. They can review all the line item details, right? Like whatever purchase they were making. As I said, quite a costly item they're buying. And they can make a decision to make a purchase here, right? And they can click the pay button. And once they hit the pay button, at this point, the merchant can capture the entire transaction. So once they do the capture, right, the real money movement would happen. That is, the merchant will get paid of the entire amount, and they can ship the item to the user. Now again, in this example, I am dumping all this information on the web. In an ideal world, a merchant should not expose all this data to the web. They should only expose information on need-to-know basis to the web. Okay, so that's all I had on a regular checkout. Before I close my session, I'll quickly give a small teaser of the upcoming app switch feature, right? So to enable app switch, right, as we saw that to enable regular PayPal checkout, all we need is put the PayPal buttons component. But to also opt into the app switch feature, we need to slightly move to a different variation of the PayPal buttons component, that is using the PayPal, one of the hooks which we have on the React SDK. Now, again, this is only available on the alpha, one of the alpha versions of React PayPal JS SDK. So I guess it should be available soon on a latest version as well. So over here, there are a few things which a merchant would need to handle. One is that rendering the default buttons, that is when a user first visits, and also handling a resume flow. So probably we can, if we want, we can chat more about it after our discussion, right? And once a merchant opts into the an app switch experience, what a buyer would get as an experience is this, that again, this demo has been taken from our sandbox environment. So it's not be really super awesome, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point here. Okay, so on this small demo page, the moment user clicks the PayPal button, right, as you might have noticed here, right, that the user moves to PayPal checkout, instead of going to PayPal web checkout, they are directly being redirected to the PayPal mobile application. And on the mobile application, the user can decide to review and make an approval, right? And it takes the user back to the merchant's web page once again. So this was way too fast, as Fahad was saying earlier. Blink it and you miss it. So let me show this once again, right? So the user was here. Let's pretend that this is the merchant's checkout page. It's not really nice and shiny, but just to illustrate the point, right? So they click the PayPal button, they go to the PayPal mobile app, they can review their purchase information, instrument, or any such detail, right? And review and approve the purchase, right? So as you can see, it's pretty fast and quick. So I hope that this should be available pretty soon. Okay, thanks all. That's all I had for this presentation. And if you want to get to these code samples, these are available here. So please feel free to clone it from here. Yep. Thanks, everyone.